The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any on-site institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everybody? My name is Steve Vanderwall.
And I'm Justin Klosser.
And we're your hosts of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. We're going to talk cultivation, business, medicine, politics, culture, advocacy, and everything in between.
The cannabis industry is complicated. It's robust. It has a lot of moving parts. And it's our job to help you understand it just a little bit better. So tune in every week for a brand new episode. And if you have a question that you'd like answered on the show, send it on over to questions@cannabiscumlaude.com. Thanks. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, Cum Laude Coalition. It has been another fantastic week here in upstate New York. We've had beautiful weather. We're still riding the high of the Rock City Cannabis Carnival, and we're looking forward to the slew of events that's coming up in the near future. If you want to make sure that you stay up to date with the events that CCL is attending, or even some of the ones we aren't, make sure you follow us on social media. Facebook, Instagram, Cannabuzz. Just type Cannabis Cum Laude into your search bar, and you'll be able to find us. Another great way to stay connected is to join the Discord server. Click on the link in the show notes, take 5 seconds to make a profile, and you're in. Virtual smoke sessions, grow chats, and some good old community building and banter. If you're not involved, you're missing out. And if you want to support the show, you can always head over to www.patreon.com/Cannabis Cum Laude. We're a self-funded podcast, and every one of your contributions helps to ensure we keep top quality sound coming your way.
So this week, we are taking a trip into the creative realm. Please use this journal while you are high. That's the mantra of the Creative Thinking Journal made by Pilgrim Soul. Today, we have the CEO of Pilgrim Soul joining us, Shawn Gold. Shawn also serves as advisor to the Executive Council of Textile and is a council member for the Ascendant Network and former advisor to MedMen and Lowell Herb Co. He also has a resume that is as long as my grocery list, but these are some of the more recent titles. Not only does Pilgrim Soul have an awesome journal to help stimulate creativity, they also have live resin disposable cartridges available. Shawn lives with his wife with the notion that where there is an open mind, there is always a frontier, that everything we've learned is not necessarily an answer, but precedence, a jumping off point for new ideas.
Professionally, he uses creative flow for empathetic understanding, hyperfocus, imagination, and idea generation. He developed advertising campaigns for some of America's best-known brands, wrote relationship advice columns for top women's magazines, and helped scale some of America's most popular news, entertainment, and social networking websites. Shawn, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Steve, Justin, thank you guys so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Thanks for joining. Funny enough, months ago, probably September, back in February, before I had even really became acquainted with Pilgrim Soul, or we had even booked this podcast, I had actually received a Pilgrim Soul journal as a gift, as a friend of mine. My good friend, he's not in the cannabis industry, knows that I am, knows that I like to write, knows that I like to, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always, journaling. And he's like, hey, I got something for you. Fast forward 6 months, here we are. So it's great to have you on today. Justin and I, we talk a lot about cannabis as a wellness and as a creativity stimulator. So I guess my first question is, what exactly brought you into the cannabis and creativity realm?
Well, I started this company. I have a company that's dedicated to using cannabis to enhance, creative performance and humans. It's a company I could have thought of when I was 15 years old. Hey, let's start a company based on cannabis and creativity. Like, it would have been a ridiculous idea then. And obviously we can, only through a lot of hard work from a lot of people can we now have a company focused on cannabis for creativity. But my life has been, about using cannabis for creativity, for many, many years, and a lot of it for work. I'm not going to work and high all day, although if that works for you, that's fine. It doesn't really work for me because I can't really multitask. But when I get into creative projects, I love to use cannabis to deeply empathize with a target audience. Like Aaron Sorkin a writer uses cannabis and mushrooms too, but he does it for like empathy. Like, what would this character say? What would they feel? For me, it was like with advertising campaigns. What would they say? What they feel? Try to get into the mindset. Really, I use it to focus. I use it to make sort of non-linear connections and things like that. So it's been a great tool for me. Used somewhat in moderation for 40 years or so. So it's hard to say when it started, but the premise of this company I started was to help people leverage some of the tools that I use, and that have brought me success in building things like MySpace and, early in the blog space, building Engadget and Autoblog and Joystick, and helping companies like MedMen and Charlotte's Web and Lowell Scale, all, a combination of life experiences, and then cannabis is a catalyst for thought.
So that actually provides a really nice segue into your expertise. Obviously lies in the marketing arena, which is on LinkedIn. It's very well proven true. You got 99 plus endorsements in not only digital marketing, content strategy, and e-commerce, which are all huge arenas of marketing, right? But in an industry filled with shadow bans, social media police, like, how do you recommend cannabis companies approach marketing so that they can actually get into the eyes and eyes and hands of the consumer? And because, like, even us, we've experienced this countless times where we try to run a Facebook ad, and they're telling us too. They're like, "Oh, hey, you should run your ad. You'll get more views. Run your ad." And we apply, we go, we try to pay for it. Oh, sorry, we can't approve it. You have cannabis in your name, even though you're an educational podcast.
Yeah,
no can do. So how do you recommend cannabis companies approach that? Sorry.
Yeah, so I've had a bunch of, at Lowell, we had probably a 70, 80,000 follower account deleted, some intern linked to where you could buy it, which is a big no-no. And you can't really go to them and say, hey, we can't have, like, why are you deleting us? So they're like, well, it's legal, or all those arguments don't work. It's like, well, we don't accept pharmacy advertising either. Like, so there's no medicinal argument for them. But the accounts that they do allow are social commentary accounts, like Cannabis Humor, I think it's called, has like 5-6 million followers. So when I started creativity on cannabis as one of my accounts, and it's like social commentary on, and it's highlighting people who use cannabis for creativity, artists, writers, thinkers, profiling historical people. And that's kind of my way to make interesting content and make it scalable. And then for my brand account, I don't mention cannabis all that much. It's mostly about creativity. I do mention cannabis a little bit. There's a couple things you can do. I mean, content is, as far as marketing, content marketing is really the biggest option for cannabis companies. Leading in, one is publishing a lot of content that helps you own the SEO taxonomy around who you are, what you stand for, what your brand's role is in society, really choosing a lane and picking it. Consumers buy brands from companies that believe what they believe. So knowing what you believe and putting out a lot of content around that is the best way to, like, own some kind of lane and be where consumers are who you align with. You can't advertise on social media. You can't advertise on Google for the most part. So the other hack that I did was creating a universe of products that enhance the efficacy of cannabis and creativity. So the Creative Thinking Journal, which you mentioned earlier, is this product that is really meant to make, again, cannabis more effective. And I can create a national cannabis brand promoting these products. I have these ideas, scratch notes. I'm creating all kinds of different games and educational products and art products that are all focused on it, enhancing the efficacy of creativity on cannabis that are not cannabis, that are meant to allow me to really legally advertise and scale the brand. So not every brand, that doesn't work for every brand, obviously, to create other products besides cannabis. But if you can, then that all gives you another way in. But it's difficult. That's one of the outdoor is something that a lot of people lean on, because cannabis is bought pretty locally. So it's hard to, even if you can advertise cannabis, it's hard to not eliminate waste, and really reach your target audience. There's a limited leafly, way of leaf. There's a bunch of endemic cannabis sites, but cannabis users are everyone. So it's just just really focusing on some of these endemic cannabis sites, which we should all support them, and I do. But it's cannabis
never going to reach the whole market.
Vanity Fair, they're reading everything. Someone asked me, I talked to someone at a business plan, like, we're going to create this upscale cannabis brand. It's like the Vanity Fair of cannabis. And my question to them was like, isn't Vanity Fair the Vanity Fair of cannabis? Like, I like to smoke cannabis and I read that, so I'm not looking, sometimes I'm not always looking for a different, cannabis lens on life. Sometimes. So this is a very long-winded answer, but content is really the only sure thing that you can leverage, that Google will respect and will help you, and index, and you'll help you find your audience.
I will say that, so I own a small CBD brand, and a big pillar of the brand is education, around organic farming and why it's good for the product and the earth, and about the endocannabinoid system. And when we had launched the brand, we had hired a content writer to go through and put PubMed and really high quality cited content, especially around the endocannabinoid system and some of the medical aspects, all cited and everything. And we were doing business for a few months, no issues, and all of a sudden your Square account has been suspended. And I'm like, well, what? Why? Not really. Everything, and coming to find out that even citing and mentioning, even in quotations, things like inflammation or whatever, anytime you use medical terminology, regardless of the context, they're like, it violates it. You made a medical claim. I said, well, I put it in quotes and cited it with PubMed afterwards. Does not matter. So long story short, we had to go through, and as an education being a part of our brand with thousands of words of content on the website, remove 90% of the content because they're like, well, we're not going to allow you to transact until you get rid of it. So, even as taking the content approach, you still have to be very careful on certain platforms, especially when money's involved, because brands and content is getting knocked off and shadow banned on the regular. So it is marketing in this industry is very, very tough.
You almost need a site for content and then a different domain.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
To your e-commerce website that you link from your content site. If it's all on the same domain, definitely risk that.
So I don't want to dive too far down into this because I want to save the cartridges themselves. I want to save that for part 2. But as far as marketing that sector of the business, is that a separate entity that you have in place that's just under similar branding? And then how do you go about marketing for your live resin carts?
Yeah. So I have a different website for the cannabis product, which is PS Canna, or Pilgrim Soul Cannabis. pscanna.com is the short version. It's pilgrimsoul.com is where I have my content and I sell my non-cannabis products. So, separating church and state, so to speak, 70 to 80% of sales are influenced by the bud tender, inside the retail, as far as cannabis retail goes. So as any cannabis brand really needs to focus on point of purchase and seducing, bud tenders, informing bud tenders, making sure they know your product and the differentiation. That's really, where we got the biggest bang for our buck at Lowell. And, it just makes the most sense. Now, we're also building out a direct-to-consumer platform for cannabis, working in tandem with another partner who delivers the product. So for that, we're using all of our non-cannabis products to build lists. Mm-hmm. And when someone, our journal says, please use this journal while you are high. If someone clicks on that or buys that product, they're pretty much raising their hand saying, I like to get high and be creative. Mm-hmm. So we have over 65,000 people in the US and probably 10,000 people in California where we sell cannabis that have opted in, and so we continue to use our non-cannabis products to build lists that we can market the cannabis product directly to. So that's kind of another hack that we've used.
Yeah. That's smart.
In marketing the cannabis product.
Smart, yeah. Has there been any pushback on that slogan as far as being able to like have banking or anything like that? Like saying, like, have they? Because we tried to start a GoFundMe account and they really restricted it. We couldn't put anything down whatsoever. Couldn't even have our logo on the picture because they're saying that it promotes something that's wow, my throat right now is federally illegal. So has there been any pushback as far as banking and anything as far as that? Please use this while you are high.
Well, it's interesting. I'm about to come out with a product that's a collaboration with a very well-known comedian, celebrity, globally known person. My next journal is a collaboration with him. And he wanted to put, instead of please use this journal while you're high, he wanted to put Cannabis Creativity Journal on the cover, on the wrap. And I was like, well, if you do, we're not going to be able to market the product, So while you're high has a very different context than cannabis. Cannabis is cannabis, but you can get high from yoga, meditation, space travel, exercise, so that's been our
runner's high.
Our argument.
Yeah.
You can get high so many different ways. You can get high on life.
Yeah, I'll tell you, learning how to market in the cannabis business must make every marketing in any non-cannabis business seem pretty easy. Or you could run a paid ad to a funnel or run some sort of free digital product, But I think, so my kind of mentor from afar, and, I got my start in e-commerce was Russell Brunson and, from ClickFunnels. And he was always doing, the books and the gifts and kind of, the journals and stuff like that, or webinars or, e-courses is stuff to give away because he's all about once you own a list, you're no longer at the mercy of the social media channels. So in our industry, it's tough because if you could just say, hey, sign up with us and get, your first eighth on us, you'd have 1 million people on your list overnight, but you can't do that. So, I think you've absolutely nailed it in terms of cultivating your own list and then being able to sell your other, more restricted products through that. It's honestly brilliant.
I do think that some of these less than legitimate Instagram companies, though, have figured out how to nail it down exactly what you were just saying. The come follow us and you'll get this free eighth. Or
I mean, there's always a workaround.
Seen some hacks. Everything is a hack. I use that term a lot because you're like, in a positive way, it's a workaround. I've seen some hacks where people are using coupon codes. Like Ease was advertising on Google using coupon sites for discounts and getting some top SEO around that is a very nuanced approach, but they were consistently using those. There's some workarounds, but it's really difficult. And that's why I'm in this business, actually, because if it was really easy, then everybody would be doing it.
Yeah. Speaking of hacks, before we go on to part two, it reminded me of something. I used to be a part of a normal subchapter here in Rochester called Rock Normal, and we were pretty much all online and social media based. We have a really small team, and we just ran everything through media. And we were able to cultivate a network on Facebook really, really quick because what we were doing, we were going to some of the more popular Reddit threads, the cannabis Reddit threads, finding the trending news of the articles, and then we would just share them, and probably we would do like the top comment because we knew it was we'd get traction, throw it on there, it'd get a ton of likes. You'd boost it to people who liked High Times and Cannabis or whatever, and all of a sudden you'd get all these new people saying, oh, this person liked your page, do you want to invite them to follow? And we would just dump a ton of money into it and invite. And over the course of like a week, we had gained 2,000 followers. Like, wow, we're going to be up huge. I mean, it was crazy. But after sharing news articles for a couple times in a row, they banned our account. And it was like we were literally just sharing news and then promoting or boosting news articles. And lo and behold, we ended up getting shut down. So
wow.
It sucked.
You've had a difficult time.
Yeah, anybody who's in this business has had a difficult time. Most people.
Since we're bringing it back to the business, there's stuff on your website, and we kind of had a scheduling issue here. So if I am catching you off guard, by all means, I apologize.
That's fine.
But there's a section on your website that talks about cannabis in the frontal lobe and how that kind of works. I was hoping that you could detail that for our listeners, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, totally. So there's a lot of research on cannabis and creativity, and it's a little bit, it's off because the definition of creativity is difficult, and how cannabis stimulates creativity is not the same for everyone. So, there was a research report I was reading about about cannabis and entrepreneurs, how it helps entrepreneurs. And basically they gave like 10 entrepreneurs one task to do and got high, and another 10 entrepreneurs another task to do, and they didn't use cannabis, and they compared the two, and it just doesn't work that way. It's like it's about life experience and moments and triggers. Like you have your life experience, and then you are out to dinner and you get high with a friend, and that the conversation sparks something, and you're maybe you're more empathetic with him, or like, and then you have an idea. It doesn't pop in a very linear way. So what cannabis does to the brain is it lights up the frontal lobe and gets those neurons firing in a more uninhibited way, and just idea production happens. I mean, everybody knows you come up with a lot more ideas when you're high. It does not mean that all your ideas are going to be good ideas. As a matter of fact, most of them will be awful. But it's better to have, 10 ideas than no ideas, or 3 highly inhibited ideas. And usually, I mean, it's the important thing, and I've said this before, is like not to like call your boss and say, I got a great idea while you're high. You got to wait and go through the
it the next day
process. Yeah. You got to evaluate those ideas. And for me, like 1 in 10 is usually worth something.
Sure.
And then what cannabis also does, so it lights up the frontal lobe, but something it does that's also important is it represses an area of the brain called the dorsolateral cortex, which is the judgment area of the brain. When you're daydreaming, for example, the dorsolateral cortex is sort of, relaxed, and in just stuff, ideas are kind of flowing. And so it's those two things of just, lighting up the frontal lobe and sort of repressing the judgment area is where cannabis is great. But again, creativity is really about just being creative. It's about what cannabis does really well is it kind of opens the aperture a bit. If you're a super creative person, it can make you more creative. If you don't feel you're, that creative, it'll open you up a bit. Doesn't mean it's going to turn you into, Picasso or F. Scott Fitzgerald, but it will push you further down the road of idea, for ideation.
It's amazing that you say that. I was actually I was waiting for you to be done, and I was going to bring that up as far as ideation goes. I just took a class where that was it was intended but not advertised central focus of the class, right? And so we kind of all got caught off guard, but maybe that was a good thing because it wasn't something that we thought we were going to be able to prep for, right? But we were learning about the process of ideation, which is essentially coming up with as many ideas as you can, no matter how terrible they are, and trying to find the good in each one and like move forward, right? And so I don't know, I just think it speaks volumes that you're talking about this. Cannabis helps you do this, And this is something that's being taught at higher level universities.
Yeah, it's also important to come out with ideas like by yourself before you get involved with the group. Like whatever the exercise is, run through it, because very often we're influenced by the group. As far as sharing our ideas, we're the leader of the group. You want to influences the group, peer pressure, judgment, all these things. So this process of ideation that you're talking about, it's really important to kind of go through that as an individual, not affected by other people, and then bring that to the group, and then and share it. It's also like there's a bunch of techniques even in the journal about coming up with ideas. There's one famous Japanese toy company that would think of a word or think of a noun, and then using the last letter of the noun, use another word. It's just a kind of ridiculous, unrelated, like elephant. I don't know, T. What's it? Elephant. I haven't done this exercise.
Yeah, it's hard to follow the rules when you're trying to think of it while you're doing it, right?
Elephant toothbrush. Oh, great. Let's make toothbrush like shaped like animals. So I just came up with an idea right there, where not necessarily it's a great idea, but I came up with an idea just by using a simple word association technique. So the journal is filled with a bunch of different exercises like that, where it forces you to challenge default thinking and look at the world in a different way, look at the world from someone else's perspective, so on and so forth.
I think setting and really the overall environment at what you're and where you're coming up in ideas is super important. Just like anything, the environment is super important. What do you think is your optimal environment for when you do your best thinking? Are you around people? Are you by yourself? What is that? What's that environment look like?
For ideation, like going deep inside problems, I tend to need to be by myself and avoid distractions whatsoever. I cannot have my phone near me. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I created a physical journal instead of an app, because I want people writing analog, and the time it takes to write something, your mind is also kind of working along with it, and it gives you like pause. It's just a different experience when you're writing on a page than if you're typing. One of my favorite things is to get high and riff with like on nonsense with just smart, creative friends, and ideas pop in, but I wouldn't use that necessarily for, if I had to come up with a particular idea for like a brand or a company or something that I had a deadline on. That's more like enjoyable and serendipitous. But I have to kind of go. It doesn't matter. I mean, like what you said about environment is very true. Like going for a walk is also an awesome way to factually meditate on ideas. It's a classic technique for entrepreneurs, and Mark Twain. So many people have talked about the walk, Steve Jobs.
Yeah,
and I think like the Post-it note like was an idea that came up, from some guys at 3M going on a walk. So there's getting out, getting in nature is an awesome way to come up with ideas. But it really kind of depends on the person. For me, it's mostly just about blocking everything out and giving myself a specific time. Like for the next hour, not answering the phone. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not talking to my kids. I'm just going deep inside this problem. And that's how I have to do it.
Yeah, we're a very distracted society nowadays with tech and phones and everything, and I'm guilty of it just as much as anybody else. But being able to say, all right, even it's from 7 to 8 a.m., no phones, no tech, like actually being able to think and think without any distraction is really, think about, you get an idea, you get on some momentum, phone rings, right? Trying to come back into, and get back into that depth that you were at and get back into that state. It's a task, right? So, to be able to just, and not everybody has tons of time. You can't always do it for 3-4 hours, but if you could allocate 1 hour of your day to no tech and just journaling and like putting some stuff on paper, it's definitely very beneficial. I know it's very beneficial for me and a lot of other friends that I know.
For years, I used to go, and I haven't done this lately because gyms have been closed, but I had this process where I'd come up with ideas. I would go through these, decks for these brands like Hot Wheels, Nestle, Nike, that I was working on creative strategy for. I would do the creative strategy not high, and I'm not great at absorbing information while I'm high. So I'd read all their decks and research and everything. And then I would put my ideas down. Then I would get high and get on the elliptical machine at the gym. And I would bring the deck and I would get high and I would factually meditate through these things and just see things I wouldn't see, empathize in ways I wouldn't empathize, make connections I wouldn't ordinarily connect with. Almost getting a second opinion for myself was one of the benefits of cannabis. But the reason I was, one, I was getting in shape while, exercise, while thinking. So that was good. But doing, I have a bit of ADD. So having a simple task allowed me to focus. If I was just sitting at my desk working on the deck, I might be distracted. But it's really impossible. I can kind of do 2 things at once, but doing 3 things at once is just impossible. So having a simple task of just going up and down in this elliptical machine allowed me to focus in a weird way. And I've seen that happen with a lot of, like my son, when he was 8, he was studying for the spelling bee, and I just could not get him to focus on the words. I was running words with him. And then I let him play like a simple game on his phone as a brief, slight distraction element. And he was able to run through the words and focus on the words by having another simple task to keep his mind occupied. It's a weird thing, but if you ever have, I don't know if you guys have kids, would you ever have kids, or, you just even need to manage yourself. Sometimes a simple thing helps you focus on another thing.
Yeah,
100%.
I find that when I'm sitting down to do homework or something of that nature, that I can sit there with no sound on and I'm looking for something to distract me, right? Constantly,
totally.
I cannot focus. But if I put some kind of instrumental on, or maybe a mild lyric, something that's not screaming at me, right? Zoned right in. I'm good to go. Especially if I just took a couple hits, let's get in here, let's do this and get it over with. But I, just like you said, I almost have to have that auditory distraction to let my brain focus on other things. Yeah. And I do think that that's something to be said for creators and creative people alike, that a lot of us probably have that ADD, ADHD sort of tendency, right? And definitely cannabis users as well.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah, and a lot of most of the great entrepreneurs I know have a bit of ADD. It's hard to imagine anybody in this world with all the information coming at you not having ADD.
Yeah. That was a pretty profound statement, actually.
The default is ADD.
But
So I think that is probably a great spot for us to end part 1. And we are going to be coming back with part 2. We're going to dive into a little bit more deeply the creative thinking journal and the live resin cartridges. So thank you, and tune in on Monday, people.
See you Monday.
Elevate your state of mind.
Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at Rockbox at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Cannabuzz. Type Cannabis Cum Laude into your search bar and you should be able to find us, but the links will also be posted in the episode notes as well. If you want to help support the show, head on over to Patreon, and that will ensure that we're able to keep the best quality sound and video coming to you on a regular basis. And if you liked what you heard today, please don't forget to rate and review the show.